So good afternoon, morning, or evening, everyone. And many thanks for accepting our invitation. My name is Ettore Greco. I'm the Executive Vice President of International Affairs Institute. I'm honored to open the 14th edition of the annual EU Non-Proliferation and Disarmament Conference that we organize on behalf of a consortium of 6 research institutes, which also includes FRS in Paris, the IISS in London, PRIF in Frankfurt, VC DNP in Vienna, and CIPRI in Stockholm. The conference is part of a project on non-proliferation and disarmament that the consortium carries out with support in close cooperation with the European External Action Service and European Commission. The consortium's core mission is to help advance the strategic debate on the prospects of non-proliferation and disarmament and offer proposals and suggestions to update and improve the EU strategy in the field. The consortium promotes a large network of European study centers specialized in arms control or strategic studies that now counts 119 members. In addition to this annual conference, the consortium organizes annual consultative meetings and ad hoc seminars on specific topics, produces research papers, and conducts various educational activities and special programs for the next generation. The agenda of today's conference covers, as you have seen, a wide range of non-proliferation and disarmament issues, including the current state and futures of treaties and regimes. There is, however, a broader overarching question that we are expected to address. If in the current extremely challenging and increasingly conflictual security environment, there are still concrete prospects to revive the arms control process, a process that has been dealt severe blows and seems in many respects paralyzed. This requires discussing how the sweeping changes in the system of international relations and the attitudes of major actors have impacted the arms control landscape. The impact has been huge, to the point that some argue that arms controls belongs to a bygone era. This is contradicted by the fact that important building blocks of the arms control architecture, such as the conventions banning chemical and biological weapons, the Arms Trade Treaty, and the NPT itself, have not only survived, but continue to be widely supported. Not as important is the work being done by organizations like the IAEA and the CTBTO, and the role of ongoing negotiations under the UN aegis. The EU is vitally interested in preserving these regimes, instruments, and framework, and has a prominent role in the efforts to consolidate them. However, the arms control edifice has been seriously undermined, and powerful headwinds are at work. Chief among them, the worsening tensions and geopolitical rivalries among big powers that prevent any meaningful strategic dialogues at the level, in particular, of the P5. The idea that arms control discussions can be somehow insulated from deepening conflict dynamics that has been cultivated for some time has proved illusory. Hence, the need that in assessing the prospect of arms control, close attention is paid to implication and outlook of major conflicts. In the last couple of years, we have witnessed an escalation of several regional conflicts with global ramifications that entail growing risk of military confrontation between big powers. The strategic links between major theaters of conflict have also become increasingly evident. The escalating Russian aggression against Ukraine, the multiple interconnected conflicts in the Middle East, the military exchanges between India and Pakistan, and the heightening tensions over Taiwan have all highlighted formidable obstacles to multilateral conflict management and peacemaking efforts in a security environment where revanchist and nationalistic impulses are steadily on the rise. At the same time, no peace arrangements, stable or temporary, for the major ongoing conflicts can succeed without effective arms control measures. In light of that, the agenda of this year's conference gives more space to the discussion of regional conflict dynamics with a focus on the 4 regions I've mentioned. In such an environment, characterized by the marked erosion of trust, the traditional debate about the appropriate mix between instruments of deterrence and defense on one hand, and arms control measures on the other remains crucial, although obviously it has acquired new meanings. The prevailing view in Europe is that a stronger defense and deterrence posture is key to paving the way for a meaningful dialogue with Russia on arms control. Arguably, once the war ends, interest in arms control may indeed re-emerge, and frameworks that have survived, such as the OSCE, might prove useful. In this sense, thinking about possible new forms of arms control in Europe in the longer run is not a futile exercise. The problem of how to balance defense and arms control is particularly acute, of course, in the nuclear realm. Nuclear powers are accelerating the modernization of their arsenals, acquiring new technologies with the high destabilizing and escalatory potential. This makes increasingly urgent the establishment of new risk reduction measures based on greater transparency and openness and stronger crisis communication channels. A major source of concern is the forthcoming expiration of the New START, the last surviving pillar of the US-Russia nuclear arms control system. The demise of New START may lead to totally unchecked expansion of nuclear arsenal. I think the strategic impact of such major development should be a central topic of discussion. Other gaps may open. Particularly worrying is the prospect of resumption of nuclear testing, which will further erode the nuclear taboo, encourage nuclear proliferation, and complicate negotiations in the NPT framework, which has seen growing polarization between nuclear and non-nuclear states. Worth discussing is also the uncertain fate now of the Ottawa Convention banning anti-personnel landmines, long considered a major disarmament achievement. Advancement in a number of technological sectors, such as artificial intelligence, cyber capabilities, precise guided munition, and hypersonic weapons, are changing the nature of warfare and the balance of power between offense and defense. These changes are adding new complexities and challenges in the arms control field and putting into question arms commitments undertaken under the existing agreement. At the same time, some technologies can help create new instruments and mechanisms for control and verification and hence enhance the effectiveness of arms control agreement. All this points to the need to integrate new type of technological expertise into arms control research community. As a matter of fact, the continuous deterioration of security environment makes it much more complicated to conclude new legally binding agreements. It's reasonable to expect that the focus will shift towards political commitments, confidence building, and risk management. However, there appears to be a convergent interest, somehow, in a shared cooperative management of risks stemming from the application of AI technologies or threatening the functionality of global commons, such as cyberspace and outer space. New opportunities for some forms of arms control aimed at risk containment may arise in all these fields. In the next 1.5 days, we will have ample room and opportunities to discuss these and other crucial issues for the future arms control. I'm sure that the very qualified panels that will introduce these sessions will provide insightful introductory remarks to kick off the debate. As shown in the program, the panels feature a mix of decision makers, officials, experts, and think tankers. On behalf of the consortium, I wish to wholeheartedly thank all of them. But we very much look forward also to questions and comments from all participants. We want to have a dialogue and exchange of perspectives and ideas as open and candid as possible. Let me thank again all of you for being with us today. I wish you a fruitful and inspiring discussion. Many thanks for your attention. And now the floor goes to my colleague Ludovica Castelli, who will briefly illustrate the conference agenda and some rules of proceedings. Ludovica, the floor is yours.
Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you, Ettore, for the kind introduction. My name is Ludovica Castelli, and I'm a researcher at IAI, where I work on nuclear politics, and I'm also a project manager for the UNPDC, where I co-organize the annual conference with my wonderful team made of Ettore, Natalie, Stine, and so on and so forth. It's a great pleasure to welcome you all. For those returning to the UNPDC conference, welcome back. And for those joining us for the first time, a very warm welcome. This is also my first year as part of the organizing team, and I must say, while there have been certainly challenges, the process has been remarkably smooth thanks to the excellent groundwork laid by colleagues in previous years and to the dedicated team who behind the scenes makes this event possible every year. My role today is simply to outline the structure of our program and give you a sense of how the discussion will unfold over the next day and a half. As in previous editions, this conference brings together a broad and timely agenda, touching on key issues around, across WMD, conventional arms control, space security, and regional dynamics. This year, we've placed particular emphasis on themes that feel especially relevant in today's international context. That includes our first keynote session on nuclear security and the physical protection of nuclear facilities, but it also extends to several parallel sessions which will explore crisis management in the Middle East, strategic stability in South Asia, and two important historical reflections, the first on the 50th anniversary of the Biological Weapons Convention, and the second on the 80th anniversary of the Hiroshima and Nagasaki bombings. Together, these sessions, ranging from the more policy-oriented to the more reflective, invite us to consider and discuss how states, institutions, and the broader international community are interpreting and responding to an evolving security landscape moved by both continuity and profound change. Now to the practicalities of the program. Following my remarks, we will hear from Benedicta von Zeer-Toos, Managing Director for Peace, Security and Defense at the European External Action Service, who will officially open the conference and set the scene for our discussion. We will then move to the first keynote on nuclear security, featuring Director General Rafael Grossi and chaired by Christina McAllister from the Simpson Center, followed by plenary sessions on nuclear and conventional arms control. Tomorrow's program will begin with parallel sessions covering topics such as biological weapons, outer space security, emerging tech, East Asia security landscape, and so on and so forth. You will be free to choose the sessions that interest you the most in each time slot. After lunch, we will reconvene for plenary sessions on intergenerational dialogue on non-proliferation and disarmament, European security and the war in Ukraine, and the state of diplomacy ahead of the 2026 NPT RevCon. And finally, a closing keynote by Undersecretary General Itsumi Nakamitsu, reflecting on the disarmament agenda 80 years after Hiroshima and Nagasaki. As Ettore already mentioned, we're honored to host an outstanding group of speakers also this year, representing a wide range of institutional, regional, and disciplinary perspectives. What truly defines this conference is not only the excellent quality of the speakers and the panels, but the spirit of dialogue and exchange that runs through it. And encourage all participants to take an active part in the discussions, whether during Q&A sessions, in the corridors and around the dinner tables. Experience shows that some of the most valuable insights often emerge from these informal conversations. I hope the next day and a half will build on this tradition and further strengthen the sense of collaboration that defines this network. And with that, it's my pleasure to give the floor to Benedicta Fonsetos, who will deliver the opening remarks and officially launch the annual conference.
Ladies and gentlemen, it's my pleasure to set the scene for this 14th edition of the EU Non-Proliferation and Disarmament Conference. This conference is only possible thanks to the work and expertise of the EU Non-Proliferation and Disarmament Consortium, and I would like to thank especially one of the consortium members, Istituto Affari Internazionali, directly in charge of this event, so thank you very much. Together, we've been inviting you to Brussels every year since 2011, diplomats, governmental officials, researchers and scientists from member states, from other states and international actors to compare notes about the current global picture of non-proliferation, disarmament and arms control. We want to reflect together on challenges but also on opportunities. This opening address has traditionally been a snapshot of what happens in our field since the last conference. Year after year, especially since 2022, we have pointed at the deteriorating international security environment that negatively affects our work, both directly and indirectly. Regretfully, the list of difficulties and obstacles is becoming longer every year, and virtually every major security crisis has non-proliferation angles. Russia has been rolling back on its arms control commitments. It withdrew from the Conventional Forces in Europe agreement. It de-ratified the Comprehensive Test Ban Treaty. It's reportedly violating the Chemical Weapons Convention on mass scale by using chemical weapons and wild control agents as a method of warfare in Ukraine, and it continues to resort to irresponsible nuclear rhetoric. Russia's war of aggression on Ukraine has other non-proliferation angles: nuclear safety and security concern with regard to Ukraine's Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant, illegally seized by Russia, or repeated CBRN-related episodes of disinformation. In strategic nuclear arms control, the implementation of the New START treaty remains suspended, while Russia refuses to engage with the US on a successor instrument. What is more, Russia tests and deploys highly concerning and destabilizing weapon systems, such as nuclear-powered cruise missile or new intermediate-range nuclear-capable missiles. China continues to build up its nuclear arsenal and declines engaging on arms control or risks reduction. The last weeks have prompted renewed speculation about nuclear testing or testing of nuclear-capable weapons. It remains to be seen. The Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty will also face a test of credibility at its review conference in 2026 after 2 consecutive failures to find consensus. As for the DPRK, we have seen an unprecedented number of ballistic missile launches in the past years, and its nuclear activities also continue to advance, all in violation of several UN Security Council resolutions. We will never accept DPRK's claim to have the rights of a nuclear weapon state under the NPT or any other kind of special status involving the possession of nuclear weapons. The situation around Iran has changed dramatically since the last conference, with unprecedented ballistic missile strikes against Israel and Israeli and US strikes against objects related to Iran's nuclear program without providing a sustainable solution which can only be achieved through diplomacy and negotiations. Weeks ago, UN Security Council Resolution 2231 expired, And as a result, with the snapback of UN and EU sanctions, the Iran file has entered a new post-JCPOA phase. Iran continues not to fully cooperate with the IAEA or abide by its safeguards obligations. In Syria, the fall of Assad's regime, some previous regions for concern about proliferation are on a good track, with the prospect of full international access to sites related to former Syrian chemical or nuclear programs. At the same time, Syrian territory has emerged as a huge reservoir of insufficiently controlled conventional arms, and the coming months and years will be decisive as to whether such arms will fall or not fall into the wrong hands. So I would say this is quite a daunting potpourri, but there is still more, like, for example, the growing interconnection between the crises, with deepening relations between some of its actors. This again unlocks a potential for weapons proliferations and new arms races. For example, the direct involvement of the DPRK in the war in Ukraine, or China's and Iran's technological support to Russia's war machine. Russia would not be able to do what it's doing without the support of these partners. Conventional weapons claim virtually all the victims of today's armed conflicts. The norms against the use of specific weapons types remain under strain. Indiscriminate attacks on civilians, arms transfers in violation of the UN Security Council resolutions, and a number of conflicts fueled by diverted arms are all examples of the challenges to the current framework. In terms of conventional arms, Ukraine remains the biggest importer in the world, if we count the military support of Ukraine's friends, including, of course, the EU member states. Ukraine's years-long heroic resistance against Russia's aggression has proven that arms supplies to Ukraine are morally just and militarily right. This, however, should not stop us of being aware and preparing for yet another scenario. The more small arms are employed in the battlefield, the bigger the risk that some of them will find their way into the hands of criminals or terrorists. The EU and Ukraine are well aware of that risk and work together on an unprecedented scale to prevent and counter this risk. Outer space, intensely used for civilian and military purposes, is also not free from proliferation-related developments, such as irresponsible behavior that may be considered as orbital tests or of anti-satellite weapons, or continued reports about Russia's plans to place a nuclear weapon in orbit. The impact of emerging technologies, and particular artificial intelligence, on warfare and arms control is getting more and more international attention. Last week, UNGA First Committee adopted a new resolution about the application of AI in nuclear command and control. Not a perfect text, not universally supported, but reflecting concerns of over 100 states. Let's be clear, AI is and will be used for warfare. We see really very fast innovations, for example, when we look at the warfare in Ukraine. But of course, we also need to set boundaries for its responsible military use so that the ultimate control and accountability for the conduct of war, and especially nuclear war, is kept in human hands. What I have just outlined might be a daunting list, but at the same time, it's only a glimpse of the numerous critical challenges that we face. And the EU is actively engaged in addressing all of them and much more in collaboration with like-minded and international partners to protect and strengthen the global non-proliferation and disarmament framework. Our dedication is reflected in concrete initiatives funded by the EU budget. Despite its gloom, there is room for optimism. I'm glad that I don't need to end on a negative note, but on an optimistic one. Amidst adversity, the EU remains unwavering in its mission to strengthen the global non-proliferation and disarmament architecture. Through international collaboration, we are transforming challenges into opportunities for progress, epitomized by our commitment to inclusivity and multilateralism, a focus championed at the recently concluded session of the UNGA First Committee. The EU's position is clear. We are open to dialogue with all, including non-aligned countries, and steadfastly support effective multilateralism. This approach ensures that global interests triumph over those who seek to reshape the world for individual gain of their states. We actively invite all who envision collective security to partner with us in this crucial endeavor. This prestigious event offers a rich agenda and welcomes esteemed speakers, including IAEA Director General Rafael Grossi and UN Under-Secretary General for Disarmament Affairs Izumi Nakamitsu, alongside leading voices from the UK, France, and the Danish presidency of the EU Council. I wish you to have insightful discussions, to have productive discussions, to drive forward momentum toward a safer, non-proliferated world. And I'm excited to introduce our keynote session, Secure Nuclear Facilities, Threats, Norms and Governance, chaired by Christina McAllister, with IAEA Director General Grossi virtually joining as our keynote speaker. Thank you very much.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Christina McAllister. I'm the Director of the Partnerships and Proliferation Prevention Program at the Stimson Center in Washington, D.C., and also the Director of the International Nuclear Security Forum, which is a coalition network of civil society organizations and individuals working on nuclear security. Thank you very much to our hosts and organizers for the opportunity to participate in this EU Non-Proliferation and Disarmament Consortium's 2025 conference. It is truly a privilege to be chairing this keynote session on securing nuclear facilities, threats, norms, and governance. We're very honored that the Director General of the International Atomic Energy Agency, Mr. Rafael Mariano Grossi, is joining us virtually as our esteemed speaker. After decades of experience in non-proliferation and disarmament, including as Argentina's ambassador to Austria and Argentine representative to the IAEA and other international organizations, Director General Grossi took the helm at the IAEA in December 2019 and is currently serving his second term in that role. The security of nuclear facilities is an urgent topic in light of recent and ongoing crises, as our previous speakers have noted, including the June strikes on Iranian nuclear sites, as well as the unprecedented seizure and occupation of Ukraine's Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant by a hostile military force, and the continuing threats it faces due to its location on the front line of the Russia-Ukraine conflict. There's also both excitement and uncertainty about the security implications of emerging nuclear and other technologies. And thus, without further ado, I am pleased to turn the floor over to Director General Grossi for his remarks.
Thank you very much. I hope you can see me well and hear me as well. Thank you very much, Christina, for the kind introduction. It's a real pleasure to participate, albeit virtually, unfortunately, this important conference that is one of the most awaited for events in the yearly nuclear non-proliferation calendar, because, of course, of the importance that the EU, through the consortium, has been attaching to this issue. The quality of the presentations, normally the speakers make it for a really important event. I'm honored to have been invited to give you and exchange with you and share with you some of the impressions on the topic, which is admittedly quite a wide one, especially in the present circumstances marked by extraordinary events. And in your opening remarks, you were already alluding to some of them. The work of the agency, spans a number of activities, and with an audience like yours, I don't need to describe the mission because you are very, very familiar with it. But it would be perhaps more important to tell you how we are seeing what we are doing, what are the most important challenges, and of course, I understand that there is some time for us to exchange views or to listen to your questions or observations that the floor may have. So, if we take as a framework for the analysis everything that refers to non-proliferation and, of course, its associated activity, safeguards and inspections, it's obvious that the most important issue facing, not the only one, but facing the agency is the situation on Iran. Among yourselves, you have Stefan, you have people who have been dealing with this with extraordinary quality over many years, and you will be privileged to hear from him and from others, I'm sure, of this. Let me give you our take on what has been happening. The problems, challenges, the situations around Iran's nuclear program have entered a completely new phase, which we need to understand in its real dimension. This is no longer business, not as usual, but as it used to be. We have to recognize that there are two very important factors that influence this remark that I'm making. The first is, of course, the attacks in the month of June, which constitute an extremely traumatic event. I'm not getting into the wide justifications and all of that. That is a political discussion, which you may be having, and others as well. But it is obvious that from the moment that use of force is applied to an ongoing nuclear program under safeguards, we are in a very difficult territory as to the continuation and ability of the agency to continue performing its functions. And this is what we have been trying to do ever since the closing of the military operation and the truce that was negotiated in June, putting an end to the military operations there. The military operations had a very clear consequence, which is the very severe damage, extremely severe damage, extensive damage to the nuclear infrastructure in Iran, in particular the sites of Natanz, Isfahan, and Fordow, places where the IAEA inspectors were inspecting facilities almost every other day, I would say. Paradoxically, the last inspection that we could perform there was on June the 11th, on practically just a few hours before the eve of the start of this military campaign. So that, of course, apart from the considerations around the use of force, meant that we had to withdraw all our inspectors from Iran out of safety considerations. I gave that order to evacuate them because it is clear that we cannot have inspectors in a country which is under fire. So that was a fact that I didn't take lightly, but of course my first preoccupation was the safety of my inspectors, knowing very well that leaving was one thing, returning would be completely different after what happened. And as you may remember, Iran, first of all, had and still has an extremely critical assessment of the role of the agency and of myself in a very personal and direct way. Not only that, but they introduced legislation which was proposed to the Majlis and then signed into force by President Pezeshkian, which was and is a quite sweeping piece of legislation that suspends all cooperation with the agency and makes it contingent to a number of considerations which are pretty subjective and have to do with a number of security concerns by Iran being fully taken into consideration by the agency, number one, without a definition for those. Another important factor that we should consider is that they established a new system to deal with inspection notifications. For many, many years, for decades, in fact, even pre-JCPOA, the agency and Iran had a system which is basically mirroring the system that we have with any other state which has a safeguards agreement or an additional protocol, which is mainly technical between our safeguards department and the safeguards office or institution in each country, whereby we, in accordance with the CSA and the AP, in the cases that applies, we notify inspections. There are mainly logistical considerations that are taken. There are on occasion also some security issues, but normally it's a logistical. When do we arrive? What kind of equipment? What is the activity that is going to be carried out? I mean, there are a number of parameters which figure in general in the CSA and in particular in the facility attachments and other documents that are necessary for inspections to occur. Well, all of that does not exist anymore. This is why I was saying it's no longer business as it used to be. So a new system has been established whereby we can, as agency, we can send inspection notifications, but these inspection notifications go up in the hierarchy to the Supreme National Security Council, which is, as you know, an institution which is very, very close to the Supreme Leader. One might say even superseding some of the authorities of the President of the Republic. So, as you can see, for example, an inspection to a research reactor or even a small laboratory adjacent to it, which is almost a routine activity with very, very little proliferation concern to it, although of course pertinent to be inspected, has to go through a system which is unprecedented and which leaves a lot of space for the Iranian government to consider whether this is acceptable, not acceptable, receivable or not, and things like that. Knowing how difficult a process like this would be, we started a number of conversations, negotiations with our Iranian colleagues, which led to much discussed, and I would even say criticized, meeting that I had in Cairo, in Egypt, with the foreign minister of Iran, Dr. Abbas Araghchi, with whom I have been working for many, many years. At that time, we signed a number of, it's not an agreement, although people call it a Cairo agreement, it's a more modest instrument that delineates a number of technical understandings that were important to reinstate in the light of this new legislation, which of course creates obligations for Iran, but not for the IAEA. So we needed in some way to reconcile these two things. We needed to reconcile and have an understanding with Iran that even in the presence of this new piece of legislation, the NPT, the Comprehensive Safeguards Agreements, and the normative, I would say, skeletal framework that we have still applies. And whereas any country can have the ability or the possibility to establish whichever system they wish, because it's a sovereign competence of a country, that cannot be done in contradiction or impeding or hindering the inspection activities that we need to have. So that was the value and the importance of that meeting, which was completely necessary. I should say, because sometimes there's also, because maybe of lack of information, there is not a complete picture of the situation. That allowed us really to return to Iran, and we have performed ever since more than 10 inspections in country, with a very, very important caveat here, which is that we have not been able to return to the attacked facilities, which are part of this space, if you want to call it like that for Iran requires special national security or national safety, national security basically, considerations. So the situation with Iran is this at the moment. We have a system of inspections, slowed down, if you want, considerably, but we have returned. We cannot say that there is no cooperation at all with Iran, although there is this very important bracket around these facilities. And the importance of this lies in the fact that these places are the places where most, if not all, of the uranium enriched at 60% still is, even after the attacks. So this poses a situation that we cannot consider as satisfactory. And conversations are continuing as of today. We have different rounds in different forms, in different formats of discreet diplomacy, trying to find a way forward, trying to find a solution to this. And as you know, in just a few days, we will have another session of the Board of Governors of the IAEA, where I will be presenting still 2 reports, because I will have like a closing report of the 2031 UN Security Council resolution, let's say the JCPOA. We are drawing a line there since the termination date has been reached. So there is no longer inspection activity related to that. Then another traditional report on Iran will be published. But to put this in non-bureaucratic terms, what we have is a situation that is not stabilized. We still have this open issue as to how to continue and to engage with the whole of the program in Iran, how to try to depoliticize the conduct of inspections, which is an obligation for Iran. It's not some confidence building or voluntary measure that they may or may not give us according to some real or perceived goodwill from the part of the agency. Of course, the agency has an obligation to take into consideration security concerns that Iran may have, and this is why we listen, and this is why we engage with them in trying to allay any doubt or any specific concern that they may have. I have said publicly, and I repeat it today, the long-lasting solution for this recurrent situation that led to a major crisis back in June lies on a diplomatic arrangement. Conversations still are ongoing with us, with some other countries, and including in this the United States. So this would be one big issue area that I would like to mention to you and give you the state of the situation as of today. The other big, of course, chunk that puts us malgré nous, should I say, in good French, since we are in Brussels, and the headlines of the international press is the situation around the Zaporizhia nuclear power plant. There, of course, recapping the biggest power plant in Europe in occupied territory, where the agency has managed to set up deployment since September 1st, 2022. So more than 3 years we have been there. Hundreds of inspectors and safety experts from the agency have rotated in and out, and we have been able to establish this presence that allow us not only to inform and monitor the situation there, which is in and by itself a very concerning situation, potentially leading to a nuclear accident with serious radiological consequences, but also, and more importantly, turning us into a field operation, which has never happened before in the history of the IEA. Now we are deployed not only there, but in Rivne, in Khmelnytsky, in Chernobyl, and also in South Ukraine. So the IEA is deployed all over Ukraine and also in this part of the occupied territory. And I must say, for those who have been following this issue more closely, that over the past few days we were able to negotiate and successfully obtain two, not only one, but two ceasefires, successive ceasefires, lasting for a few days, which allowed under IAEA supervision and monitoring, which allowed the critical work to repair two main lines that were feeding the nuclear power plant and which are essential to ensure the cooling function of the plant. First, it was the Dniprovska line on the side of the Russian occupied territory, and then the Ferovsplatna line on the other side. We maintain regular rounds of negotiations and conversations with both sides, with us, myself leading the IEA teams, engaging in high-level conversations, as you may have seen, involving very frequently, President of Ukraine and the President of the Russian Federation. I am going to be this week back in Russia, and then will be returning to Kiev for the continuation of these important consultations. So these are the two main big headlines where the agency is playing a critical role in two of the, I would say, most salient crises or issues or situations which we can see in the international agenda these days. Of course, there is the normal agenda of the IEA, which is incredibly important as well when it comes to our work in new areas where we see nuclear activities propulsing itself with artificial intelligence, modularity of reactors, new designs. All of these are areas in which the agency is actively engaged in dissemination of information, designing of new safeguards approaches, and also updates as necessary of safety standards and security guidelines. So this is an ongoing process, this is an ongoing work, which we are, of course, extremely proud of, and which will, of course, continue. Maybe, Christina, I should stop here in case there are comments or views from the floor, which I could take and could maybe complement or supplement what I have been saying so far. So I stop here. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Director General Grossi. I think I can speak for everybody that those were very, very helpful and fascinating insights into the details of what the end of JCPOA means for the IAEA and safeguards in Iran. And everybody's, I think, also very grateful for the work that the IAEA is doing in Ukraine. And both of those, but the work in both, as you say, is somewhat precedent-setting. So while the group here is considering their questions, I'm sure they've already got many, I did just want to ask what the mechanism for asking. Oh, I see there's got microphones in the back. Okay, so people will raise their hands when they have a question. I'm just going to kick it off, take my chair's privilege here, and just follow up on both the Iran and the Ukraine situation. You know, as we followed this over the past several years, there's been a lot written and discussed about this new sort of state threats to the security of nuclear facilities sparked by these events in Ukraine and Iran. And given that the current international nuclear security framework is oriented toward non-state threats, many have offered opinions and recommendations on, on the one hand, developing a new legal instruments, or alternatively updating current guidance and legal instruments, or simply preparing better within current frameworks for these kinds of threats. I'm just curious, how has your thinking on securing nuclear facilities evolved from when you took office?
Well, obviously, we can say that if we compare 2019 with December, it was, with all the things that happened after that, starting with COVID in February 2020, and then everything that came. The situation internationally has changed a lot. And we have to consider that when we approach the situations we are faced with. In the case of the IEA, it is clear that we needed to do that because of the unprecedented nature of some of the things that have been happening, and I referred. So this is not, or not necessarily, situations that were foreseen in the normative schemes that that we have. In the case of Iran, of course, JCPOA was an ad hoc arrangement, agreement, which lasted what it lasted. Now we are in a sort of open field, knowing what we know, also knowing what we ignore, in a certain sense, cognizant of the fact that we need to maintain the presence of the IAEA there, and that it is important that Iran does not leave the NPT. I think we have to recognize that it has been good and important that Iran has declared that they intend to remain within the IAEA system. But as I have described, there is some room for improvement when it comes to compliance with the obligations that come with it. We are in the belief, as I said, that a new form of understanding, agreement, pick your own word for that, must be tried and concluded so that we can have a comprehensive system that would allow us to get back the confidence that it is absolutely necessary to give the credible assurances to the international community that there is no proliferation risk emanating from Iran. The area that has presented the completely unprecedented situations has been that of nuclear safety, of course, and this stemming from the situation at the Zaporizhia nuclear power plant. Here, I would say, there were two alternatives for us. One would have been to say, well, the nuclear power plant has been occupied, there is a war, we cannot continue to work in the current circumstances. And perhaps that would have been, normal. We did the exact opposite. We plunged in the middle of it. And in here, I want to emphasize the value of adaptation and practical steps that can be taken within existing normative structures. In the current international circumstance, I think an audience as distinguished and informed as the one you have there would agree with me to say that any attempt to shape new norms, new agreements, new treaties, whatever the good intentions we may have, would, of course, be doomed, because we are confronted with a situation of extreme fragmentation in the world. This is a reality that we need to recognize. So, confronted with that, what is the option? Simply throw our hands and say, well, nothing happens and nothing can be done, or try something. And this is what we did. And from this stem a number of things. You may remember the 7 basic pillars that the agency established on nuclear safety, which are nothing but a distillation in a very concrete, easy to understand and to implement way, are a distillation of hundreds, if not thousands, of pages of nuclear safety standards, which we consider at the moment, and considering the emergency of the situation, perhaps some of you may remember us with these 7 criteria and some color codes indicating whether the situation in Zaporizhia and in Chernobyl in the beginning, because don't forget that Chernobyl was also occupied, what was the situation? Was it green? Was it yellow? Was it red? And this had to do with the physical integrity of the plant, the functioning of radiation monitoring system, the situation of the staff, the ability to keep supply chain and transportation, the relation with the regulator, and so on. So this was already a concrete, objective, applicable and practical reaction that we had, which was complemented, because it's 7+5, with the 5 basic principles which I enumerated at the United Nations Security Council, which of course were not a brilliant concoction out of my own head. This came out of and as a result of a long, painstaking negotiation with Ukraine and Russia on a number of basic points that they should be and could be expected to agree on, so that we could avoid situations as we had had until the summer of 2022, where the NPP was being bombed, shelled. I saw, you may have seen the photos, huge holes caused by heavy artillery on the roof of which hosted fresh fuel at the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power. So that needed to be done. And this negotiation, of course, was done in that way, and I went to the UN Security Council, not expecting a resolution, because that would also have been impossible and doomed, or a presidential declaration that would have been preceded by a long and probably failed negotiation because of the structural fragmentation that exists there. I simply negotiated that with them, and I proposed that the Director General of the IEA will simply say it, and everybody would acquiesce with it, which is what happened. Obviously, this was in 2023. The 7+5, the 7 pillars, the 5 principles have been helping us. They have been, on occasion, violated, but by and large, and I knock on wood, and I hope that nothing terribly serious will happen, because until, my performance indicator, which is that we make it to the end of it without a nuclear accident. So, no mission accomplished at all. But we have a number of parameters which are known to the international community and which are observed by both sides. By the way, as I was saying, you may have seen what we could broker and negotiate. Nothing else, bigger ceasefires maybe are difficult, but the IEA seems to be able to have ceasefires. And we had 1 and 2, and we have been able to preserve the security and the safety of the nuclear power plant. Does this mean that we are in paradise? No. The occupation continues, the war continues, the situation over the plant, there is, of course, a mutually excluding interpretation of the situation. For Russia, their nuclear power plant, international law says the opposite, Ukraine says the opposite, and we know that by law this is the case. But I think these are good examples that show us that existing norms may offer ways for us to operate with technical diplomacy to try to secure an objective, a goal, which in this case is avoiding a nuclear accident. So this is how we have been trying to operate, as I said, with enormous difficulties, with moments where not everything is going in the right direction. But I think by and large what we are seeing is an active defense of nuclear safety with an agency that got involved.
Thank you, Dr. Grossi. I'm going to open up the floor now, since we're running short on time. I'm going to open up the floor to questions. And if you could keep them very brief, okay, so that Director General Grossi has a chance to answer. Thank you. And we can get to as many as possible.
I am Margareta Kinner-Nellen, former MP of Switzerland, and I'm speaking here on behalf of PNND, parliamentarians for nuclear non-proliferation and disarmament. Now, thank you very much, Director Grassi, for your energy and courage that you've taken about the safety of Zaporizhia. It's about Zaporizhia that I want to ask you a question, having led personally for OSCE Parliamentary Assembly several fact-finding missions to Ukraine. My question is about the water, the cooling water reservoir in Zaporizhia. Could you say a few words? You have reported in your updates about the dropping water level. What are the groundwater wells able to supply, or what are other reserves? This is of our concern. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Ambassador, for that very important, very pertinent question. This is another Achilles heel of the whole situation there. As you rightly say, first because of the war in general, and secondly after the destruction of the Novakharkovka Dam in the summer of 2023, the situation, the hydrological balance of the plant was fundamentally altered, meaning that the levels of water in the reservoir necessary to cool the station diminished considerably. The situation is as follows. The Russian management of the plant has dug a number of wells, at the moment around 11, which have been pumping water from the underground water table. And also they have built a small dam in one of the canals leading to the reservoir in order to keep the minimum levels, which at the moment are being kept. Of course, we have passed the evaporation season, if I can put it in these romantic terms, which is the summer. In the summer, of course, you've been there, I guess, or in Ukraine at least, with the OSCE. Ukraine, is extremely hot in the summer and very cold in the winter. So in the summer, there is a lot of evaporation, but the levels are being kept at the necessary minimum required for the cooling of the plant at, very important, cold shutdown, which means that the plant is not operating, producing energy at the moment, as is. There is a lot of speculation. I don't want to get too much into that. There's a lot of speculation about the possibility of the Russians wishing to restart it. And we have some calculations, of course, with our technical people as to how much in terms of a restart this amount of water could sustain, which would be rather limited. But we are not in that position yet. For now, Ambassador, the situation is under control.
Thank you, Director Grossi. Can we have the microphone? Oh, somebody's got the microphone there in the back.
Director General, my name is Mariana Bujarin. I'm a researcher at MIT, and my current project is to document the Russian seizure and occupation of Zaporizhia nuclear power plant. I have conducted dozens of interviews with evacuees and operating staff to this effect, and the pervasive leitmotif of every person, from the lowly electrician to the top management with whom I had the honor to speak, is that the international system has failed them. That nobody before March 3rd, 2022, nobody on that plant, working at that plant, could even imagine that something like the seizure of a nuclear power plant is possible. They expected a lot more of the international community. Now, we know that some of it comes from perhaps wrong expectations of the capabilities of international community to act in these situations. So perhaps it would be honest to communicate to the world not only the accomplishments, but some of the manage the expectations, right, for other states and other nuclear operators as to what might happen when a member of the IAEA, the founding member, a state that was part and parcel of designing the rules on safety and security of nuclear power plant, suddenly becomes an aggressor. and nothing can be done to prevent that. But my question is the following. There are plans that we know of that the Russian side has circulated for restarting the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant. And this latest loss of offsite power event was largely believed to be part in executing this plant. There's a new cooling pump that has been apparently either moved, already deployed there, or is in plans to be deployed to Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant. What is the agency stance on the Russian plans to restart this power plant? Are the 4 people that's stationed there from the agency at any given point of time are capable of actually attesting that the equipment, the level of maintenance, the personnel is properly trained and licensed for these plants to go ahead? Thank you.
Very good. Thank you. Thank you very much. All very valid points. As for the first part of your question, of course, that is part of the frustration, the aggravation, the sadness of a war happening. And it's completely understandable. On the second part, the agency is and has been very public about the possible restart of the plant in these circumstances. This is something that I myself have been discussing with the Russian side on many occasions, and of course with the Ukrainian side as well. And the position of the agency is that any restart in these circumstances would not be advisable. Not so much, or perhaps also because of the water situation, as I have just described it, or the very fragile external power supply, but mainly because this is a combat zone. So for as long as this continues to be a combat zone, this continues to be a war zone, the restart of a nuclear power plant, not this nuclear power plant, a nuclear power plant is not advisable. So the position of the agency, perhaps people do not read what we publish, but has been very, very clear. We have updates every other day, public updates every other day. And I can assure you that the 4 people that we have there, sometimes it's 4, sometimes it's 5, sometimes it's 6, sometimes it's 3, depending on the rotation, depending on the level of activity. As you know, these people are living there. They have a very heavy work schedule. They sweep the plant up and down, and we have conversations, and we do assessments. So yes, we can determine what is happening there. So I am pretty confident of what our observations are. Of course, what is limited, and we should not mislead people, is our ability to influence political decisions by Moscow or by Kyiv or by anybody. My mission is to ensure nuclear safety and security, and when there is a problem, to say it out loud, and to make known why we are saying this. So I don't know if this addresses more or less your concerns of what is happening and what the agency is doing there.
Thank you, Director Grossi. Do you have a few more minutes? We have a little flex in our schedule here. If you do also, I could take a few more questions.
Go ahead with, let's try to be efficient. I don't have too much time, but a couple of other questions maybe.
Okay, we'll keep going until you need to drop off. Next question, who has the microphone? I think I'll take the gentleman in the second row here.
Yes, Director General Grossi, my name is Ayman Khalil. I am from Jordan. I'm a good friend of Jacek and Mina, who are sitting next to me, in front of me.
Good.
And I have a few comments which are really important for my beliefs and convictions towards the agency, that is. First one is, in your statement in the 69th regular session of the IAEA, you've mentioned Iran 8 times, you've mentioned North Korea 1 time, and you've mentioned Israel 0 times, and I'm doing this online. And I'm sure that this is not an act of bias, but if it's not bias, then how can we refer to this? Second issue is to do with the Israeli aggression, the Israeli attacks on Iranian facilities. We believe that this is an aggression on Israel, not on Iranian sovereignty, but on IAEA sovereignty. IAEA, which promises immunity for nuclear power plants, an aggression, an attack, which basically abolished half a dozen resolutions issued by the agency, an attack, which basically, and you don't hear anything about this. Zaporozhye is an acute case. I agree with you, but in the case of Iran, we're not talking about bombs and holes, as you've mentioned. We're talking about total destruction of facilities, and then no single word of condemnation coming out of the agency. How can we justify this? And thirdly, Your Excellency, winning the hearts and minds of the young generation, especially in my part of the world, in the Middle East. I work in an organization which runs a next generation track, and it is really alarming to see the level of mistrust and the suspicion surrounding the agency, especially to do with this encounter. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you very much. A very important issue you deal with, although there are many questions. Some are subjective, some are technical, but let's address those, Dr. Khalil. It's of course very important. And I think it has to do with the way in which we frame our analysis. If I am talking about the safeguards activities of the agency, and I am talking about the program in the Islamic Republic of Iran, our approach is to look at that and to inform about that, not to start making political judgments as to whether we need to balance with Israel. And on this I say with enormous confidence, because I am on record publicly saying that we expect every country in the Middle East to sign up to the NPT and to subject all the nuclear facilities to the IAEA safeguards. But if we, Dr. Khalil, with all due respect, if we start saying that because we inspect Iran, I don't mention that I don't inspect Israel, which I don't, because Israel is not a part of the NPT. And this makes invalid what we do in Iran. I think, with all due respect, this is a wrong approach. What we all hope is that Israel will subject all its nuclear activities to the safeguards, and that we will have universality of the NPT. Who can doubt that? But once we are party to a treaty, we have to comply with it. It's not a forced measure. It's so maybe people like you could help restore the confidence in international organizations by explaining well to the society what are the parameters under which the agency operates. You know, in a certain sense, there's a parallel to what was said before about people being frustrated because we cannot liberate the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant. I can understand the frustration, and I do respect the frustrations that have to do with political decisions of sovereign member states with which we can agree or disagree. And you say that the IAEA promises immunity, and I wish I could. No international organization, no power in this world exists that can promise immunity to anything. So I think we need to be objective. Never be defeatist, and I really hope that we can have a system which is truly universal. But meanwhile, we have to deal with the realities that we have. And I hope you will trust the work of the IAEA, which is a very valuable, it has nothing to do with me, sir. I will leave this place at some point, and somebody else will come. And the IAEA has been doing a tremendous service to international peace and security throughout its long history. I sincerely believe that.
Thank you, Director Grossi. Do you have time for one last question?
Yes,
Okay.
yes, the last one.
Let me take the gentleman here in the fourth row.
Yes.
Thank you. This is Dr. Yorgos Levendis. I'm the founder and director of International Security Forum in the Republic of Cyprus, with a presence in the Hellenic Republic and, of course, in the European fora, international fora. Dr. Grossi, you referred to your concern about the safety of your inspectors in Iran, primary concern. My question regards the Israeli attack in June.
Yes.
Did you have any forewarning, any foretelling, or any indication by any Israeli official that the attack in the Iran's facilities, nuclear facilities, was imminent? Either an Israeli official in Tel Aviv or in Vienna, when you're based, any kind of indication? Because I've got an interview here, please correct me if I'm wrong. On the 9th of June, you gave an interview and expressed concern that an attack by Israel could solidify Iran's determination to pursue a nuclear weapon. And you added that you did not believe that Israel would strike at that time. Well, within 48 hours, Israel did strike.
Yes.
Was that
I should see it before I agree that those are my actual words, but I will not avoid the question. I think that what is important, we didn't have a pre-warning. There were, in the course of the night of the attacks, a number of communications which are confidential by nature, but that were aimed at protecting the lives of the people who were there. So this is what I can tell you. But we didn't have a pre-warning. No, we didn't.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Director Grossi. I want to be respectful of your time, and with that, I think we'll need to close the session. But thank you very much for all your comments. We've learned a lot about the new world that the IAEA is operating in Iran, continued work in Zaporizhia, and the complexities of the situation in the Middle East. And we're very grateful for your insights. So with that, please join me in thanking Director Grossi for being with us.
Real pleasure.